that's an old tune for the northeast of Scotland. That's Jenny Dang the Weaver, which was composed by the minister at the parish of Birse, just across the River Dee, not too far from Abine, or Aboyne, composed by the minister there, and I think it was about 1747, so it's a good age of a tune. The northeast of Scotland, folk nowadays tend to think of kind of geographical areas and distinctive styles that you can pigeonhole kind of neatly. It's not quite as straightforward as that. Thinking about some of the players that I mind when I was a young lad, kind of older players, they certainly never mentioned really that they were northeast fiddle players, although they came from the northeast of Scotland. They certainly didn't consider themselves northeast players. One of the greatest fiddlers for this corner was Hector MacAndrew. Certainly I kind of aspired to be like him, I suppose, as a fiddler. Born in 1903. He was a Scottish fiddler. James Scott Scarr, this famous example, he would have said the same, but they were very proud of the fact they came from the northeast of Scotland, but they didn't kind of restrict the style to being distinctly fae here, and it's quite hard to describe Fittmark's playing distinctly northeast, because a lot of the techniques and the characteristics are found in other areas in Scotland, and even the repertoire. If you think about like the type of tunes we play, well, they play slow airs in lots of different countries. They play jigs, notably in Ireland, but although they were kind of developed here in Scotland first, same with reels, strathspeys. But there are definitely musical fingerprints that mark it out as being distinctly northeast, I suppose. Geographically, if I'm thinking about the northeast of Scotland, I'd be thinking pretty much Aberdeenshire in the middle, Moray to the west and north, and then Angus, the county of Angus, to south of Aberdeen, between Dundee and Aberdeen. So that would be really the northeast, although I've seen maps that say the northeast tucks in much of Perthshire as well, but I would be inclined to nay agree with that really. They're kind of distinctive geographical areas, although there's a lot of crossover, as you would expect. So that's the rough area we're talking about in terms of northeast fiddle music. One of the first things I would probably mention is dialect and how you speak. So in the northeast of Scotland we speak, it's a dialect of Scots called Doric, and very similar to Lowlands down in the south of Scotland. A lot of the same words that you might hear in the poetry of Robert Burns, for instance, but the pronunciation is a little bit different. A bit like if you go to the Western Isles, you find it's a bit different in Skye for Lewis, or even indeed South Uist for the North of Ireland for they speak Gaelic and Gaelic. So that definitely would colour the development to a unique style. Lots of non-English words actually, so we have lots of words for like a Scandinavia and the Low Countries. So smoke would be Rick, which is for the place Reykjavik, comes from smoke, or smoky. To ask is to spear. Kirk is church. Park, for Gaelic, that's a field. A house is a house. So you've got a lot of this. A fearing, that's something that, like the first line you put up when you're ploughing, that comes from Gaelic. That's the true line, that means truth, I think, in Gaelic. And then there's a lot of the words that begin with W, like when, where, and what, are fan, far, and fit. For some reason, I'm not really sure why that kind of developed. So food of you do, how do you do? So it's a bit like that. Once you begin to get an ear for it, you can pick it up. So that definitely feeds into distinctive rhythmic sensibilities, I would say. Kids, the first thing they hear is their mother's voice and the voices that they hear about them as they're growing up. I might hear them recording myself on a reel-to-reel tape when I was very young, and it was very, very strong in the accent, and it was very northeast, even when I was a youngster. So that I was hearing it definitely coloured that. So that would actually feed into why you've got different regional styles. So it's accented, I would say, yet still very musical. So let's get a tune. a strathspey. I think it's one of the easiest things to demonstrate for the distinctive regional distinctness to the play. And I once heard it said that in the northeast of Scotland we speak in strathspeys. That was an American lassie said that, and I think that's quite nice actually. So I'm going to play Glenlivet by James Scott Skinner, and I was taught this by a man called Angus Shaw who came from Bankery. Angus was a great teacher. He used to puddle about it, fixing fiddles and things. Very distinct northeast style, heavily accented. And he said, Glenlivet, if you can play that, you can play anything. Now that's a bold statement, and I'm not sure it really would suit you for playing a bit of Paganini or something like that, but certainly as a strathspey, I think that he was getting at it. You could play any strathspey if you could play Glenlivet. So let's have a wee go with that. So of course that's easier to play if you didn't add in all these little characteristics like unisons and updriven bows and stuff like that. And we'll get onto that a bit later. But that's a fairly typical and traditionally popular strathspey of Scott Skinner's Glenlivet. So one aspect distinct vocal dialects and therefore distinct regional styles and differences. It's the language folk speak, but you can, I think in the northeast of Scotland, traditionally, if you go back to when these different regional styles were developing very organically in their own environment, the northeast of Scotland was really quite isolated, quite cut off. Certainly for the central belt, we've got these Grampian mountains kind of keeping us cut off to the north, for the south. To the east, we've got the North Sea. To the north, we've got the Moray Firth, and then to the west, you've got the Cairngorms. So, although there were certainly paths and drove roads through all these mountains and over the hills, great for smuggling whiskey and moving cattle about, they were absolutely awful in bad weather. So, communities were quite isolated. I mean, it's now known for kind of fishing villages to be no more than 2 miles apart and distinct linguistics that are quite distinct for each other, even though there's only 2 miles apart. So it's quite a mixed picture. You'll find pretty close together. There's differences. An example would be the hill of Clochnaben. We call it Clochnaben. To the south, I think it's called Clochnaben. To the north, it's Clachnaben. So that's the hill. The legend is that it's the devil's wife's buried under it. But Clach is stone in Gaelic, and Ben's a hill. So the hill with a rock on top, which describes it pretty well. So that's just one example. And even today, if you listen to fishing folk, the places like Peterhead and Fraserburgh, they've got quite a distinct dialect. The Fairland communities use the same words, but they sound completely different. So on that, we'll just play a strathspey by Peter Milne. This was inspired by where he was brought up as a boy just outside Tarland at the Muir and that's where he worked as a cattle herd when he was a young lad. Well, the golden age of Scottish fiddle music was during the time of the likes of Neil Gow, Robert McIntosh, Nathaniel Gow, and William Marshall. Now, the reason for that was because it was the golden age of Scottish country dancing. So really for that time, Scottish country dancing became the kind of dominant dance form in Scotland. So you've folk like these great aristocrats are patrons of that type of dancing, and therefore the fiddle music. And so fiddle players like Neil Gow and William Marshall are writing music for great balls and dances and castles and stately houses. And it really superseded all the other types of dance to a large extent. Things like Scottish step dancing, Highland step dancing that survived in Cape Breton largely died out in a lot of Scotland. There would have been places for it kept going, because you do find isolated areas that maintain their own unique traditions. Highland dancing, again, that was some of it was much less then as a public thing. You kind of survived in the army and the kind of the Highland Games circuit, but for community dancing, Scottish country dancing was dominant. And because of that type of dancing and its requirements rhythmically, that definitely had a feed-in effect into the fiddle playing in the northeast of Scotland. So things like the long note in a strathspey, so you've got your dotted quaver followed by a semi-quaver or vice versa. You're really at least doubling that, so that the effect on the dancers is that when you've got the travelling step, it actually lengthens it, and the dance begins to pick up a nice, lovely, fluid feel to it. When you're dancing to step dancing in Cape Breton, it's a quicker style, and it requires a different feel to the playing. So if I just maybe give you a wee bit of an example, a tune I like using is because it's great for teaching, but again it's played in Cape Breton and it's played in Donegal as well, is the Duke of Gordon's Birthday by William Marshall. So I'll play it once through in the kind of northeast style. So that's got that distinctive pulling out the long notes. If you go to Donegal, which has got quite a strong Scottish influence into its musical tradition, it's part of the Gaeltacht as well, so they've got very much part of that. But for fiddle music, seasonal workers travelling back and forth between the two areas, strathspeys are brought back to Donegal, and they play what are known as Highlands, which are strathspeys, but they've got a very different feel. So that tune is a Highland in Donegal. So here it is in the northeast. Donegal, it's more like this. Now, I didn't come from Donegal, as you may have noticed, but it's more like this. Same tune. Then you go to Cape Breton and it changes again, and once again, I'm not Natalie McMaster, but it's a bit more like this. A lot of open bowing in Cape Breton compared to the northeast of Scotland. Traditionally, you would have kind of slurs, staccatoed slurs updriven bows and things like that, syncopated triplets, which is something you don't really find out with the northeast too much, but anyway. So that's really the kind of things that feed into the style to do with the dancing. So that was the Duke of Gordon's birthday with William Marshall. Step dancing did kind of survive to a degree in Scotland, but not really very officially. There was little bits and pieces. The only two folk that I ever heard mention it had seen step dancing traditionally was first Danny Cooper, who's a fish merchant for Aberdeen and a fantastic folk singer and tradition bearer. He minded his granda step dancing. He saw him do that, and I was amazed because I was very much led to believe, and I think it's a common perception, it was that kind of West Highlands was far it was done, which was why it kind of travelled across to Cape Breton and survived there. And then, to my amazement, my granny, while she died a few years ago now, she'd quite bad dementia, but when she was still very much compos mentis, we were speaking about this, and for some reason it came up. And she said, "Oh, your great-granddad used to do that." This is her dad. And I was amazed when she said that. So he was born here in the Howard Cramar for Tarlanders, and he took a firm at Fingen, which is nae far away really, but she said, "Oh, aye, if he'd had a dram," and he didn't drink a lot, but if he'd had a dram and the music started, his feet would go like a clappers. So there you go. So I can't help but think that maybe would have fed in to a bit of a difference in style here in the Howard Cramar, because this is where Peter Milne came from. He was James Scott Skinner's tutor. So, I mean, maybe that was part of the tradition in this area. Again, this is speculation because there's not much evidence to go on, but these little bits and pieces do begin to tell a little bit of a story. So, speaking about Peter Milne, here's his most famous tune, John McNeill, and it's one of these tunes that's so popular and widespread that in some cases folk didn't care where it comes from, but I care where it comes from. It comes from Tarland. Peter Milne wrote this for John McNeill, who was a champion Highland dancer. Peter travelled all over Britain, an itinerant fiddle player. He led orchestras, played for country dances and things like that, and he taught the young Scott Skinner how to play his strathspeys and reels. So this is John McNeill. Last time I was in Vancouver Island, was playing in Victoria, and there was one of the local fiddlers come up at the end of the concert. I'd done a concert with George Donald, great pianist that played with Scotland at Wood, and he came up to say, "Oh, enjoyed the performance and really liked that you'd played one of our local tunes." And of course I'd never played one of his Canadian tunes, and he says, "Oh yeah, he played Big John McNeill." And I said, "Oh, that's near Canadian tune, that's Scottish." He says, "Oh no, it's nae, it's Canadian." And so we had a bit of a ding-dong argument back and forth, very polite, but you have to get kind of serious about these things, protect your local pride a little bit, but eventually he admitted he didn't ken who'd written it. But what he said was that that tune is so well known in the west of Canada that he just had assumed it was Canadian. So there you go. Peter would be absolutely baffled by that. His tune's travelling so far, but I think he'd be delighted at the same time. Anyway, it's Peter Milne and the tune comes from Tarland. So I thought I would just maybe run through some of the significant players and composers for the northeast of Scotland. And some of these are very familiar, some of them nae so much. So I've got quite a long list. So I've got them written out and I'm going to go through them. First, James Macpherson, come from Highland Banffshire actually. He's the man that is featured in Macpherson's Rant, but he was a real figure, executed in 1700, and that's the man who famously smashed his fiddle out his knee when he was on the gallows or what to be hung, and played this tune that he wrote the night before, and very well known. Robert Burns put lyrics to it. It goes on. So that's James Macpherson, executed in Banff in 1700. William Marshall, born in 1748. We've got Isaac Cooper, 1755, come from Banff. William Christie, Cumiston, near Turriff, 1778. Archibald Duff, Montrose, 1794. John Morrison, Peterhead, 1797. Archie Allen, Forfar, 1794. And his cousin, James Allen, same place, 1800. Real player to the Earl of Airlie, so quite a man of that. Joseph Lowe, who came from Marykirk in Angus, although I think he spent most of his career in Edinburgh. He was born in 1797, and this is probably one of his better Kent tunes. I play it myself, but it's one of the tunes that Hector McAndrew recorded. It's one of Joseph's, was a good composer. This is the Waverley Ball. Peter Milne, the Tarland, one of my own ancestors, born in 1824. Alexander Walker, Riney, 1819. He actually emigrated to America, up in the northeast. I think it was Vermont or Maine, somewhere like that he went. James Scott Skinner, the Strathspey King, 1843. John Dancy Reid, from Newtile in Angus, 1869 he was born. John Murdoch Henderson, from New Deer, 1902. Jimmy Dickey for New Deer also, 1886. Hector McAndrew for Fyvie, 1903. Duncan Strachan, Petarch, probably about the same time. He was an old man for he died in 1970. Bill Hardy for Aberdeen, born in 1916. Angus Shaw, Banchry, well, I don't know when he was born, but it must have been early 1900s, I think, by the age of him. Angus Cameron, Kerry Muir, he was born in 1937. His uncle was Jim Cameron, led the Cameron Men. And then we've got like a Dougie Lawrence, my own teacher, born in 1957, and James Alexander from Bath for Bucky, 1955. So there are some of the significant figures. Then you're getting into kind of modern times when they're all very much alive, a bit like myself, who are still playing, but their folk it would be kind of significant figures that were keeping a distinctive style in the Northeast going just by playing the fiddle. So we're going to hear a few recordings of some of these folk actually, and you can maybe begin to pick up a bit of a feel and some links and tradition, but we'll go through one or two of the techniques you find in kind of Northeast fiddle style. And strathspeys are good for that because there's a lot of potential for variety and bowing when it comes to that. So I'm going to use a tune called Mackenzie Hay by James Scott Skinner. So if I just play it for a start. what's going on there, because it's just basically... So, kind of things... Up-driven bows, drive and lift. A turn. The unison. Without it, it's kind of a bit lacking in character. Drones. So they're pulling out the long notes. So they're shorts. Shorts are very short, longs are pulled out. Gives you a very distinct feeling, a very distinct rhythm. So that's the kind of things. Unisons, accented snaps, up-driven bows, pull out your long notes, keep your short notes short. So that's... Neither of that is uniquely northeast of Scotland, but you definitely find them concentrated there traditionally, although I'd say it's getting a bit harder to find that type of playing. Slow airs traditionally would be very expressive, good use of louds and softs, kind of dynamics are definitely there, pushing and pulling the tempo to kind of help with that sense of feeling. So if you're playing a slow air, if you're building it up, you get quicker and you're pulling it back at the end of a phrase as it gets quieter, and that sort of stuff is very typical northeast fiddling. And again, it's not something that's uniquely kind of northeast, but it's definitely found as part of that. Triplets and jigs, usually, well, I'm going to take a Neil Gow tune, Stool of Repentance, usually written like this. You never play that. We were never taught actually how to do it. You just picked it up for everybody else, some of the old players. And I was never taught how to play jigs by Dougie Lawrence. I suppose maybe thought there was enough art in them, but we never competed with jigs actually as it happened. So I think that's partly to do with it. But kind of about a third of the dances at a Scottish country dance are going to be jigs. A third strathspeys, a third reels. So jigs are very, very much part of the tradition, and like everywhere else in Scotland, jigs are written here as well as any other place. So, but it's near like this. Can you hear it? It's da da dum dee da da rather than da 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 da. I once saw somebody for the Highlands Strathspey and Reel describing. He was the was it Doug Stewart was the conductor for the Highlands Strathspey and Reel in Inverness, and he was giving a demonstration on how you play jigs, and it's pretty much the same thing in the Highlands, I think, as it is here. So again, it's not unique, but that's very much part of it, how things would be played here. But you got to hear the accents, you got to hear the separate notes. Short notes might be short, but they're not unimportant. Okay, so they need to be coming through clear to hear that triplet accent. Reels, again, there's nothing uniquely kind of northeast in how you play them, but again, they're not played like they're written. It sounds odd, especially if you're a classical musician. They kind of, you've got the semi-quavers. With their A even. That's correct, but very dull. So. Hear that? Of course, if you try to do that deliberately, you overdo it, usually if it's happening for a tell folk. That's something you tend to pick up through playing with other players that are experienced, you pick that little things up. It's like picking up your dad's accent or your mother's accent by hearing their voice. You soak it up. So I think the proper word is osmosis. So you develop these things subconsciously. If you try to artificially learn, it's like learning Doric and you're not a native Doric speaker. You'll find that folk, it's well meaning, I'm sure, but they'll often completely butcher the sound of it. It doesn't sound right at all. Kind of music can be like that. So it's best done in an organic fashion. So I think that's pretty near it for kind of Northeast Fiddle style stuff. Like I said, I'm going to play a list of Northeast composers and players, and you'll hopefully begin to get a sense of some regional musical fingerprints. We're speaking strathspeys in the northeast of Scotland. Well, before we'll play through some of the recordings I've got, some of the kind of significant Northeast players, certainly the ones that there's recordings of. Some of them like William Marshall and James McPherson are obviously too far back to hear recordings, but anyway, we'll get to that. But I thought, just touching on expression in slow airs, I thought it'd be nice to maybe play something that has a lot of expression and highlights that I was saying about dynamics and pushing and pulling the tempo. This is The Valley of Silence by James Scott Skinner. Not a tune you hear much at all now, really, but certainly when I was alone in my teens, it's the kind of tune you would hear at the championship competitions up and down the country because it was kind of suitably demanding. So here we go, this is The Valley of Silence. Another wee bit on Northeast Fiddle that I nearly forgot to mention, really, and it was the playing a slow strathspey. Now, again, these are nae only found in the northeast of Scotland, but I think it'd be fair to say that it was traditionally a real speciality in the northeast, and certainly some of the best examples of slow strathspey, some of the most demanding examples are by composers for the northeast of Scotland. Slow strathspeys are performance tunes. They're tunes with the characteristics and bowing and rhythm of a strathspey, but played slower. It says in the tin, slower. However, they've got the expression and the use of dynamics and the push and pull of tempo that you would find in a slow air. So they're not for dancing to. You can play them up to speed and dance to them, and it's not too much of a problem, but they'll lose a lot of the essential character, and they never sound as good. I've been playing with bands that have had them in their sets, and I find them very disappointing musically to play, but you play them at the right speed and they're a different thing entirely. So it's a place where you really get to hear the kind of characteristics that you typically find in the northeast, of the long notes and the snaps, up-driven bows, unisons and that kind of thing. So I'll maybe go through two or three just to kind of show you the similarities. And so I'm going to start with a tune called J.F. Dickey's Delight, and this was by John Murdoch Henderson, a very typically northeast style of composer, great admirer of James Scott Skinner, and this was written for Jimmy Dickey, who come frae New Deer and was one of the great stylists when it comes to the playing of slow strathspeys. He was renowned for them, and this is a suitably big tune for him. And the thing to kind of look out for in slow strathspeys is that sometimes when you find that the spaces between the notes are essential for conveying the character of the tune, for getting the sense of pace and rhythm. So they're never more important than the melody, but they are very important for the feel. So this is J.F. Dickey's Delight. Bit there, so you get a sense of that. You can hear for the spacing in places is really important. This is one by Peter Milne. This is called James O. Forbes, of course. Beautiful tune. Not quite dying out really, but you could see the potential for them kind of just disappearing through neglect. I'll be honest, you never hear many folk playing slow strathspeys, which is a shame because I think there's nothing quite like them, and I just think they've got so much room for character and expression. This is a tune by James Scott Skinner and Peter Milne. They wrote this together. It was like master and student, but by this point they were kind of best of pals, and the shakings of the pioke. A pioke, it's like a pocket or a pouch. That's where the word poker comes from. A pioke, a poke. Like a poker chips. Or a pioke is how you'd say it in Aberdeenshire. Anyway, the shakings of pioke, they had only enough money in their pioke to buy 1 dram. Disaster. So that's the shakings of pioke. So it's almost unique in that you've got two of the great Scottish fiddle composers for the North East working in one tune together. So that's slow strathspeys. Again, they're not uniquely northeast, but they are a bit of a speciality. But some great slow strathspeys for other places. You've got Captain Simon Fraser's Beauties of the North, which is a beautiful tune, one of the best slow strathspeys actually. And you've got tunes by folk like Nathaniel Gow. So there's good ones about, but these are a few typically northeast and very distinctly so. One or two players I forgot to mention. It would be remiss not to mention Alistair Hardy. I mentioned his dad, Bill Hardy. Alistair's very much still on the go, but part of a great family tradition for the northeast of Scotland, including Matthew Hardy, the great violin maker, one of Scotland's greatest, known as the Scottish Stradivarius, and very fine instruments they are. If you can get hold of one, grab it with both hands. And also Bert Murray, who came from Aberdeen. Again, Bert, and sadly died it's a good few years ago now. How many, I can't remember. Could be 20 years, but he was a very prolific composer, over 1,000 tunes, I think. A lot of which wouldn't be well kent really now, but his best known is a reel called Sean Maguire, which was written in tribute to the great fiddler Sean Maguire for the North Island, come from Belfast, certainly buried there. Bit of a legend, and he did play this tune, which says a lot because he was quite a prickly character, Sean. But Bert wrote Sean Maguire, and I think that would be a good tune to finish up this little presentation before we hear some of these other recordings. So, Sean Maguire. Playing here in Migvie Kirk to play something quick like that. But that's very much keeping in the kind of northeast fiddle tradition. It's the kind of thing that James Scott Skinner would have written and did write. But anyway, all the best. That's a wee bit on fiddling for the northeast of Scotland.